quiet widow's daughter warns a millionaire cowboy before the German deal.
More coffee for the gentleman. Do not speak unless spoken to. It's your first day.
Yes, Mrs. Gable.
The terms regarding water usage rights are unacceptable. Mr. Weber says he is very impressed. Tell Mr. Weber I am glad to hear it. It is the best grazing land in the territory.
He says the land is very expensive, but it is worth the price.
We agreed that the transport cost would be shared.
I will not be threatened. If this is how...
Your translator is lying to you.
Unaware she just saved him from losing everything, the dusty Wyoming afternoon was quiet inside the Grand Hotel. 12-year-old Clara carried coffee into a private hotel parlor. Inside, powerful men were about to make a deal worth a fortune. At the table, millionaire rancher Harlan Miller trusted his translator to speak for him. But Clara understood every word the German investor was saying. She knew something was terribly wrong. The translator was not making mistakes. He was lying. So she stepped forward and whispered 3 words that stopped the entire room.
Your translator is lying to you.
And what happened next would reveal that the lie was only the beginning, uncovering a far greater secret hidden in the Wyoming dust. The parlor air tasted of stale cigar smoke, but the real poison was the lies being spoken aloud. Clara adjusted her white cotton apron for the second time. She was 12 years old, with thick blonde braids and a quiet demeanor that made her perfect for hotel work. The Grand Hotel was the finest establishment in the Wyoming Territory. It was a place where cattle barons and railroad tycoons came to carve up the frontier. Workers like Clara were meant to be entirely invisible. "More coffee for the gentleman," whispered Mrs. Gable, the hotel manager, giving Clara a gentle nudge toward the heavy velvet curtains of the private parlor. "Do not speak unless spoken to, child. You just pour and you step back." Clara nodded. She knew the rules. She had to keep this job. Her mother, a widow, was currently in the hotel's stifling laundry room, scrubbing linens until her hands bled. The pennies Clara earned in tips paid for her mother's lung tonic. Survival on the frontier required silence, and Clara had been practicing silence ever since her father died. She stepped onto the thick Persian rug of the parlor. The midday sun fought through the drawn curtains, casting long, dusty shadows across the room. At the head of the oak table sat Harlan Miller. He was a millionaire, but he did not look like one. He wore a faded canvas coat, and his face was tanned and deeply lined from decades in the saddle. His hands, resting on a map of the territory, were calloused and scarred. Harlan was a man who built his empire in the dirt, and he commanded the room without needing to raise his voice. To Harlan's left sat a man who did look like a millionaire, though he was merely an employee. Silas Thorne wore a sharp woolen suit that cost more than Clara's mother made in a year. His hair was slicked back, and his smile was quick, polished, and utterly hollow. Silas was the translator. Across from them sat the foreign investor. Heinrich Weber was a wealthy German industrialist looking to expand his holdings into American beef. He sat perfectly straight. He wore a heavy broadcloth suit that was entirely unsuited for the sweltering Wyoming summer. His pale blue eyes were sharp, scanning the contract on the table with intense focus. Clara moved toward the table like a ghost. She approached the German gentleman first, pouring the steaming coffee into his porcelain cup. "This clause about the water rights is unacceptable," Heinrich stated firmly in his native German, tapping a thick finger against the paper. Clara froze. The heavy silver coffee pot hovered an inch above the cup. German. The words washed over her, clear and vibrant. Clara's late father had been a German immigrant, a gentle watchmaker who spoke his native tongue to her every night before bed. But it was her maternal grandfather who had taught her the true weight of words. Colonel Amos Bradley of the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry. He had led the perilous night raid at Miller's Crossing during the war, securing vital supply lines for starving Union troops. Colonel Bradley had learned German from his immigrant soldiers. He used to tell Clara, "A soldier protects the weak with his rifle, Clara. A good citizen protects them with the truth." Clara forced her hands to remain steady. She finished pouring the coffee and stepped back, blending into the dark mahogany paneling of the wall. Heinrich had just said the clause about the water rights was unacceptable. It was a serious business dispute. Water in Wyoming was worth more than gold. If a ranch did not have access to the river, the cattle would die. Silas Thorne leaned forward, flashing his polished smile at Harlan Miller. Mr. Weber says he is very impressed with the boundaries of the property. Silas translated smoothly into English. He is quite pleased with the river access. Clara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. That was not a mistake. That was not a simple misunderstanding of a difficult language. Silas Thorne had taken a firm objection and turned it into total agreement. Harlan Miller tipped his hat back slightly, looking pleased. "Tell Mr. Weber I am glad to hear it. The Sweetwater River runs right through the lower valley. It is the best grazing land in the territory." Silas turned to Heinrich. "He says the land is very expensive, but it is worth the price," Silas said in German. Clara tightened her grip on her serving tray. Silas had completely ignored Harlan's comment about the river. Instead, he told the German investor that the land was expensive but worth the price. It was a blatant lie. Silas was deliberately keeping both men in the dark. He was separating them, ensuring neither truly understood the other. Clara moved to pour coffee into Silas's cup. Her heart beat wildly against her ribs. She was just a girl, a widow's daughter. If she dropped a cup, she would be fired. If she spoke out of turn, she could be thrown out into the dusty street. She needed the money. She needed to buy her mother's medicine. But what about the railroad access? Heinrich asked in German, his brow furrowing as he pointed to a different page. "We agreed that the transport costs would be shared. This contract says I bear them alone." Clara translated the words in her head instantly. Heinrich was asking about the railroad access. He was pointing out that they had agreed to share the shipping costs, but the contract stated Heinrich would bear the full expense alone. It was a trap. Whoever drafted the contract was trying to ruin the German investor. Silas chuckled, patting the table lightly. He looked at Harlan. "Mr. Weber is making a joke about the long train ride from New York. He is very eager to conclude our business so he can rest." Harlan Miller frowned slightly. He looked at the German investor. Harlan was not a fool. He had survived blizzards, rustlers, and droughts. He knew when a man looked ready to laugh, and Heinrich Weber did not look like a man telling a joke. Heinrich looked angry, but Harlan did not speak German. He had no choice but to trust his hired man. "Well," Harlan said slowly in his deep, gravelly voice, "tell him we are almost done. If he is comfortable with the terms, we can sign the papers, and I will buy him a steak dinner." Silas turned to Heinrich. His German was clumsy, heavily accented, but functional. "Mr. Miller demands that you sign now," Silas told him in German. "There is no room for further discussion." Clara gasped quietly, covering her mouth with her free hand. Silas had just told Heinrich that Harlan Miller was demanding he sign immediately, and that there was no room for further discussion. Silas was turning Harlan into a tyrant, trying to force the German into signing a bad deal out of pressure. Heinrich's face flushed red. He was a proud man. He placed both hands flat on the table and pushed his chair back. "I will not be threatened," Heinrich snapped in German. "If this is how Mr. Miller does business, then I am leaving." Heinrich had just declared he would not be threatened, and if this was how Harlan Miller did business, he was leaving. Silas Thorne's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. The deal was slipping away. He quickly turned to Harlan, his oily smile returning in full force. "Mr. Miller," Silas said smoothly, "he is extremely happy with the terms. He says he is ready to sign right now." Harlan Miller relaxed. He reached into his canvas coat and pulled out a heavy gold fountain pen. He uncapped it and slid the contract and the pen across the table toward Heinrich. Heinrich looked at the pen, confused. He had just threatened to leave, and the American was offering him a pen. The German looked at Silas, demanding an explanation with his eyes. Silas nodded encouragingly. "Sign it," Silas whispered urgently in German. Clara stood by the curtains. She closed her eyes. She saw her mother's tired, pale face in the steam of the laundry room. She saw her grandfather, Colonel Bradley, standing tall in his blue uniform, reminding her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what was right despite it. Harlan Miller sat back, waiting for the signature. Silas Thorne gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white with anticipation. Clara stepped away from the wall. Her soft black leather shoes made no sound on the rug, but her presence suddenly filled the room. She walked directly to the head of the table. She ignored Silas Thorne. She stopped right beside Harlan Miller's chair. She leaned in slightly. Her voice was quiet, trembling like a leaf in the wind, but it was clear enough to cut through the heavy silence of the parlor. "Sir," Clara said. Harlan Miller paused. He looked down at the young girl in the white apron. "Your translator is lying," Clara said. The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner suddenly sounded like hammer strikes. Harlan Miller did not shout. He did not wave her away. His pale, weathered eyes locked onto Clara's small face. "What did you say, child?" "He is lying, Mr. Miller," Clara repeated, her voice growing slightly stronger. "The German gentleman did not say he was happy with the land. He said the clause about the water rights is unacceptable, and he did not tell a joke about the train. He said the contract wrongly forces him to pay all the railroad shipping costs." Silas Thorne leaped to his feet. His chair scraped violently against the wooden floorboards beneath the rug. "Mr. Miller, this is absurd," Silas shouted, his polished sod cracking instantly. "This is a child, a hotel maid. Get her out of here at once." Harlan Miller raised one calloused hand. He did not look at Silas. He kept his eyes entirely on Clara. "Go on, little girl," Harlan said softly. "Just now, Mr. Miller," Clara said, taking a deep breath. "You told Mr. Weber you would buy him a steak dinner if he signed. But Mr. Thorne did not translate that. Mr. Thorne told him in German that you were demanding he sign immediately and that you refused to discuss it further." Harlan's jaw tightened. "And when Mr. Weber got angry," Clara continued, "he said he refused to be threatened and was going to leave. But Mr. Thorne told you he was ready to sign." Harlan Miller slowly lowered his hand to the table. He turned his head and looked at Silas Thorne. The cattle baron's face showed no anger. It showed something much colder. "Is that true, Silas?" Harlan asked. "She is a lying urchin," Silas spat, his face pale and sweating. "She probably doesn't know a word of German. She just wants attention. I demand you call the manager." Harlan Miller slowly picked up his gold fountain pen. He capped it with a soft click. Then, he looked back at Clara. "Do you speak German, child?" Harlan asked gently. Clara nodded. "Yes, sir. My father was from Berlin, and my grandfather was Colonel Amos Bradley of the 4th Pennsylvania Cavalry. He taught me that a citizen protects the truth. I could not stand here and let this man steal from you both." Heinrich Weber had been watching the exchange in total confusion. He understood the tone of the room had shifted violently, but he did not know why. Harlan Miller looked at Clara. "Tell Mr. Weber exactly what I am about to say. Tell him in German." Clara stood up straight. "Yes, sir." "Tell him," Harlan began, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble, "that I apologize for the profound insult that has occurred at this table. Tell him that I had no knowledge of the altered shipping costs, and that any man who tries to cheat my partners answers directly to me." Clara turned to Heinrich Weber. She spoke in flawless, beautiful German, conveying not just Harlan's words, but the heavy, honorable gravity behind them. Heinrich Weber listened to the soft, melodic German falling from the young girl's lips. As Clara spoke, the heavy anger in Heinrich's chest dissolved. In its place came a chilling, absolute clarity. He looked at Silas Thorne. The polished American translator was trembling, his slick veneer entirely shattered. Heinrich did not need to speak English to understand the universal language of a trapped thief. "Is this true, little one?" Heinrich asked Clara in German, his voice lowering to a gentle, respectful tone. "Did he alter the terms of the railroad costs?" "Yes, sir," Clara replied in German. "He changed the words to make you pay for everything. And when you grew angry, he told Mr. Miller you were happy." Heinrich closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, he looked at Harlan Miller and gave a slow, deep nod of understanding. Silas Thorne realized the bridge had burned. He scrambled backward, bumping into the mahogany wainscoting. "Mr. Miller, you cannot take the word of a hotel maid over your own man. She is just a child." Harlan Miller did not raise his voice. He did not stand up. He simply reached into the deep pocket of his canvas coat and let the heavy iron barrel of his Colt revolver clink softly against the edge of the oak table. He did not draw the weapon. He did not need to. The sound alone was enough to freeze the blood in Silas's veins. "Sit down, Silas," Harlan said. The command was quiet, but it carried the unstoppable weight of a falling redwood. Silas slowly sank back into his chair, his breathing shallow and rapid. "I have spent 30 years building this ranch," Harlan said, his gaze fixed on the map spread across the table. "I have fought cattle rustlers, droughts, and blizzards. But the lowest creature I have ever met on the frontier is a man who poisons a well he was hired to draw from." Harlan leaned forward, his weathered face catching the slivers of sunlight piercing through the velvet curtains. "Who paid you, Silas?" Harlan asked. "Because I pay you quite well. So whoever bought your loyalty must have offered you a king's ransom to sabotage this deal. Was it the Chicago Meatpackers? Or the Northern Railroad Syndicate?" Silas swallowed hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead, ruining his slicked-back hair. The Syndicate, sir," he stammered. "They want the Sweetwater Valley. They knew if Mr. Weber signed that contract, the shipping costs would bankrupt his operation within a year. The Syndicate planned to buy the land for pennies on the dollar once he defaulted." Harlan's expression remained carved from stone. He turned to Clara. "Tell Mr. Weber," Harlan instructed softly. Clara took a breath. She turned to the German investor and explained the plot in clear, precise German. She explained the Northern Syndicate, the shipping costs, and the deliberate trap set within the contract. Heinrich listened intently. A muscle in his jaw twitched. When Clara finished, he looked at Silas Thorne with profound disgust. Then, he looked at Harlan Miller and nodded once more, a gesture of deep, mutual respect between two men who had just avoided a disaster. "Get out of my sight, Silas," Harlan said, finally removing his hand from his pocket. "If I ever see you in the Wyoming Territory again, I will not bother asking questions." Silas Thorne did not need to be told twice. He snatched his bowler hat from the rack and practically ran from the parlor, the heavy oak doors swinging wildly in his wake. The silence returned to the room, thick and heavy. The grandfather clock in the corner resumed its steady, rhythmic ticking. Clara stood near the table, the silver coffee pot still resting on her tray. Her hands were shaking again, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming adrenaline of what she had just done. The parlor doors swung open again. This time, Mrs. Gable, the hotel manager, marched in. Her face was flushed with panic. She had seen Silas Thorne sprinting through the lobby. "Gentlemen, I apologize," Mrs. Gable blustered, smoothing her skirts. "I do not know what that commotion was." Then, her eyes landed on Clara standing at the head of the table. Mrs. Gable's face turned scarlet. "Clara, what on earth are you doing?" Mrs. Gable hissed, stepping forward and grabbing the girl by the elbow. "You were told to be invisible. You have disturbed these gentlemen. Get back to the laundry room this instant. You are finished here." Clara's heart plummeted into her stomach. The laundry room. Her mother. Without this job, they would not eat. Without the tips, there would be no medicine for her mother's failing lungs. The courage that had kept her standing tall a moment ago suddenly evaporated, leaving her feeling like a very small, very frightened 12-year-old girl. "Please, Mrs. Gable," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "I just—" "Release her arm, madam," Harlan Miller said. Mrs. Gable froze. She looked at the millionaire cattle baron. Harlan was leaning back in his chair, his calloused hands resting calmly on the table. "Sir?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice trembling. "I said release her arm," Harlan repeated. Mrs. Gable let go of Clara as if the girl were made of hot iron. Harlan reached into his canvas coat. He pulled out a heavy gold eagle coin and placed it on the oak table. It caught the dim light, gleaming with the promise of a month's wages. "This young lady is no longer serving coffee today," Harlan said plainly. "She is conducting my business. I am buying out her shift for the rest of the week. If anyone in this hotel gives her or her mother a hard time, I will buy the hotel and fire the staff. Do we understand one another?" Mrs. Gable stared at the gold coin, then at Harlan, and finally at Clara. She swallowed hard. "Yes, Mr. Miller, completely understood." She backed out of the room, closing the heavy doors softly behind her. Clara stood frozen. She looked at the gold coin. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was enough to buy a doctor's visit for her mother. It was enough to buy real food, perhaps even a train ticket back east. Harlan gestured to the empty leather chair where Silas Thorne had just been sitting. "Have a seat, Clara," Harlan said gently. Clara hesitated. A maid did not sit at the table with guests. But the rules of the Grand Hotel had just been completely rewritten. She carefully pulled back the heavy leather chair and sat down. Her feet barely touched the Persian rug. Heinrich Weber watched her sit. The stern, formidable German industrialist reached across the table. He picked up a clean porcelain plate, placed 2 sugar biscuits on it, and slid it gently toward Clara. "Eat, child," Heinrich said in German, offering a warm, grandfatherly smile. "A good citizen needs her strength." Clara smiled back, a genuine, tearful smile. She took a small bite of the biscuit. It tasted like sweet victory. Harlan pulled the thick, multi-page contract toward the center of the table. He uncapped his gold pen once more. "All right, Clara," Harlan said, his voice steady and calm. "Your grandfather was a brave man, and he raised a brave granddaughter. Now, I need you to be my bridge. Let us read this contract, line by line. I want to know every single trick they tried to play." Clara wiped a stray crumb from her chin and sat up straight. She looked at the dense legal wording on the paper. It was difficult, but she understood the roots of the language. She understood the truth. "Yes, Mr. Miller," Clara said. She looked at Heinrich and repeated the sentiment in German. "Wir fangen von vorne an." We begin from the beginning. For the next 3 hours, the parlor became a sanctuary of truth. The Wyoming heat beat against the window panes, but inside, the air was cool and focused. Clara read through the clauses, translating the English into German for Heinrich, and translating Heinrich's responses back to English for Harlan. They found 4 more altered clauses. The syndicate had tried to steal grazing rights, manipulate the cattle head counts, and force the German investor into paying exorbitant fees for winter feed. Every time Clara exposed a lie, Harlan crossed it out with a heavy stroke of black ink. Every time a fair agreement was reached, Heinrich nodded his approval. Through the young girl with blonde braids and a white apron, 2 titans of industry began to build a genuine partnership. They spoke of the land, of the harsh winters, of the value of an honest day's work. Clara did not just translate their words, she translated their respect for one another. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue across the parlor, a soft knock came at the door. Clara paused her reading. Harlan looked up. "Come in," he called out. The heavy door creaked open. Standing in the doorway was Clara's mother, Sarah. Sarah was a frail woman, her hands red and raw from the lye soap of the laundry room. Her plain gray dress was damp with sweat. She looked terrified, her eyes darting between the wealthy men and her daughter sitting at the table. "Clara," Sarah whispered, her voice rough from the harsh chemicals she breathed all day. "Mrs. Gable said, she said you were in trouble with Mr. Miller." Clara stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. "Mama!" Before Clara could run to her, Harlan Miller stood up. The millionaire cattle baron removed his hat and held it over his chest. He bowed his head slightly, in a gesture of profound respect. "Ma'am," Harlan said, his voice rumbling with genuine warmth, "your daughter is not in trouble. In fact, she just saved me from losing half my livelihood to a pack of thieves." Sarah stared at him, utterly bewildered. She looked at Clara, who gave a reassuring, tear-filled nod. Heinrich Weber stood up as well. He did not speak English, but he understood a mother's worry. He placed his hand over his heart and offered a deep, formal bow. "Your daughter," Harlan continued, looking at Sarah with a soft smile, "has a gift, a rare gift for honesty. I am in need of someone I can trust to handle my international correspondence. I pay fair wages, and my ranch has a fine, dry house with clean air that is much better for the lungs than a hotel basement." Sarah raised a trembling hand to her mouth. Clara looked at Harlan, her eyes wide with shock. A house on the Sweetwater River, clean air, good wages. It was not just a job, it was a rescue. Sarah's trembling hand fell from her mouth. She looked at her daughter, her small, brave girl standing shoulder to shoulder with titans of industry. A house? Sarah whispered. Her voice was brittle, worn down by years of grief and labor. Mr. Miller, we are just... You are the family of Colonel Amos Bradley, Harlan interrupted gently. And you raised a girl who just saved the Sweetwater Valley from a band of thieves. You are not just anything, ma'am. Clara turned to Heinrich. She did not want the German gentleman left out of this moment. She spoke softly in German. Mr. Miller has offered my mother and me a home on his ranch. He says I will help him with his letters. Heinrich's pale blue eyes softened. He looked at Sarah. He noticed her raw hands, her frail posture, and the undeniable pride shining through her exhaustion. Then, he looked back at Clara. Did you say your grandfather was Amos Bradley? Heinrich asked in German, his voice suddenly thick. Of the Pennsylvania Cavalry? Clara nodded, her braids bobbing slightly. Yes, sir, he was a colonel. Heinrich took a slow, deep breath. The stern industrialist suddenly looked very vulnerable. He reached into his heavy broadcloth suit and pulled out a small silver pocket watch. He pressed the latch. The lid popped open. He did not look at the time. He looked at an old, faded tintype photograph tucked inside the lid. He stepped around the heavy oak table and walked toward Sarah. He held the watch out to her. Sarah hesitated. Then, she looked down. The photograph showed a group of Union soldiers. In the center sat a tall man with a thick beard, a cavalry saber, and kind eyes. Sarah gasped. She reached out, her rough fingers hovering over the glass. That is my father. Heinrich nodded slowly. He switched to English. It was heavily accented, halting, and clearly difficult for him, but the effort he made to speak it was immense. I was a boy, Heinrich said, his voice quiet with memory. A private, 19 years old. I spoke no English when I arrived in America. Your father? He protected his immigrant men. He learned our words so we would not feel alone. Heinrich tapped his chest firmly. He saved my life at Miller's Crossing. He pulled me onto his horse when the line broke. Sarah stared at the German millionaire. The parlor fell completely silent. The sheer impossibility of the moment hung in the dusty air, binding the four people in the room together. Harlan Miller took off his faded hat and held it tight against his chest. Well, I'll be. Heinrich turned back to Clara. He smiled, a bright, tearful smile that stripped away all his severe formality. He switched back to German, speaking the words with profound reverence. A soldier protects the weak with his rifle. A good citizen protects them with the truth. Clara's eyes went wide. You know it. I am the one who translated it for him, Heinrich said softly. He said it in English. I gave him the German words. He practiced them every night by the fire. The emotional weight swelled in the small room. It was not a random coincidence. It was a harvest. Colonel Bradley had planted seeds of kindness and courage decades ago in the mud of a terrible war. Now, in a dusty Wyoming hotel parlor, his granddaughter was reaping the reward. Sarah wiped a stray tear from her cheek with the corner of her apron. The heavy burden she had carried since her husband died seemed to lift, evaporating in the warm light of the room. Mr. Miller, Sarah said, her voice finding a steady, quiet strength she had forgotten she possessed. We would be honored to accept your offer. Harlan nodded, a wide smile breaking through his weathered face. The honor is mine, Mrs. Bradley. I will have my ranch hands load your belongings into the wagon right now. You will not spend another night in that laundry room. It is Mrs. Vance now, Sarah corrected gently. But thank you, sir. Mrs. Vance, then, Harlan said respectfully. He placed his hat back on his head and turned back to the table. But first, we have a piece of paper to fix. For the next hour, Clara sat between Harlan and Heinrich. The two men no longer looked at each other with suspicion. They looked at each other as true partners. Clara's mother sat in a comfortable leather wingback chair by the window. She rested her aching feet. She watched her 12-year-old daughter work. They struck out the predatory clauses. Harlan agreed to split the railroad costs evenly, just as he had always intended. They adjusted the water rights. They established fair, honest boundaries for the winter grazing. When the contract was finally corrected, it was a mess of crossed-out lines, margin notes, and heavy ink blots. But it was honest. It is not pretty, Harlan chuckled, looking at the heavily altered legal document. But it is true. Clara translated the joke for Heinrich. The German laughed, a deep, booming sound that shook the empty coffee cups on the silver tray. "It is the most beautiful contract I have ever seen," Heinrich replied in German. Harlan signed his name at the bottom of the page with a bold, sweeping hand. He slid the paper and the gold pen to Heinrich. The German industrialist signed his own name with careful, precise letters. Then, Harlan pushed the contract directly toward Clara. "Sir?" Clara asked, confused. "A contract needs a witness, Clara," Harlan said simply. "Someone to testify that the minds met and the truth was spoken. I can think of no better witness in this entire territory than you." Clara looked at her mother. Sarah smiled and gave her a slow, proud nod. Clara took the heavy gold pen. Her small, delicate fingers gripped it tightly. She carefully leaned over the paper and signed her name at the bottom of the page. Clara Vance. The ink dried. The deal was done. Harlan folded the document carefully and slid it into the inside pocket of his canvas coat. "All right, gentlemen. And ladies. I believe I promised someone a steak dinner." Heinrich smiled and nodded in hearty agreement when Clara translated the offer. They walked out of the parlor together. The main lobby of the Grand Hotel was bustling with travelers, weary cattlemen, and loud railroad workers. When the heavy mahogany parlor doors opened, the noise immediately died down. People turned to look. They saw Harlan Miller, the undisputed king of the Sweetwater Valley. They saw Heinrich Weber, the wealthy European investor whose money was about to build a new railway spur. And walking right between them was a 12-year-old girl in a white apron, holding her mother's hand. Mrs. Gable stood rigidly behind the front desk. She looked as though she might faint. She watched the group walk toward the front doors. She did not say a word. She knew better. Harlan stopped briefly at the front desk. He looked at the hotel manager. "Mrs. Gable," Harlan said calmly, "send someone to clear the coffee in the parlor. Miss Clara has retired from the hospitality business." Mrs. Gable swallowed hard and nodded meekly. "Yes, Mr. Miller, right away." Harlan tipped his hat and pushed through the heavy brass doors. Clara and Sarah followed him out into the bright Wyoming afternoon. The air outside was hot, but it smelled of pine trees, dry earth, and freedom. The dust from the street swirled like gold dust in the sunlight. A large wooden wagon with a sturdy canvas cover sat waiting by the boardwalk. Two massive draft horses stomped their hooves impatiently. One of Harlan's ranch hands tipped his hat respectfully as they approached. "Take Mrs. Vance and Clara to the ranch, boy," Harlan instructed. "Put them in the guest house near the river. Tell the cook to fire up the stove and make them a proper supper." "Yes, boss," the ranch hand said, hopping down to help with their meager bags. Heinrich stood by the wagon. He looked at Sarah and Clara. He took Sarah's rough hand and bowed over it, kissing her knuckles gently. It was the highest form of respect he knew how to give. Then he looked at Clara. "Thank you, Clara," Heinrich said in German. "You saved my honor today, and you honored your grandfather. I will never forget it. Safe travels, Mr. Weber," Clara replied in German, offering a small, dignified curtsy. Heinrich climbed into a waiting carriage to head toward the train station. Harlan swung gracefully up onto his tall bay horse. Clara helped her mother climb onto the wooden bench of the wagon. The seat was hard, but to Sarah, it felt like a throne. Clara sat beside her. She looked back at the Grand Hotel one last time. The dark windows seemed small now. The heavy bricks looked far less intimidating. She realized in that moment that true power did not come from immense wealth or fancy woolen suits. Power came from standing in the light and refusing to hide. The driver snapped the thick leather reins. The wagon lurched forward, the wooden wheels clattering cheerfully against the hard-packed dirt. They drove past the rowdy saloons, past the bustling general store, and out toward the open plains. The vast Wyoming sky stretched out before them, an endless, breathtaking sea of blue above the rolling green hills. Sarah put her arm around Clara's small shoulders. She pulled her daughter close. Clara rested her head against her mother's side. She could hear her mother breathing deeply. The air out here was already cleaner. "You did good, Clara," Sarah whispered into her daughter's hair. Clara closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of the afternoon sun on her face. She remembered the pure terror she had felt standing in the parlor, holding the heavy silver coffee pot, debating whether to speak. She had risked everything they had, but as her grandfather had taught her, a bridge is built to carry weight. A bridge is built to cross the dangerous spaces. Today, she had built a bridge out of truth, and it had carried them all the way home. And that is where Clara's journey rests for now. Whenever I share these frontier tales, I hope they offer you a quiet escape from the everyday. I would love to know how you listened today. Perhaps you were enjoying a warm cup of coffee, sitting on the porch, or just unwinding for a peaceful evening. Please leave a comment below. I truly read every single one. Also, tell us which country you are watching from. It is wonderful seeing how far the truth travels. If you enjoyed this, liking and subscribing ensures our trails cross again. Thanks for sharing this time with me.